Hey everybody, welcome to the Mana League. I'm John as always, and it's time for the Red Shadows over Innistrad set review. We're going to go through every single red card in the set, commons, uncommons, mythics, rares, everything, and discuss how they will be in the limited format. Three disclaimers, of course, are off in the white and blue set reviews. Make sure you go check those out so you know what's going on, what my frame of reference is, etc. The most important, of course, is that this is a limited set review. I will be talking about primarily draft, because that's what we're all going to play the most of in limited, but also sealed, because of course that's the pre-release format in a week from now, as well as just a fun format to play with sealed leagues online and all that kind of stuff. But without further ado, we are going to jump right on into the first card. Up first, we have Avacyn's Judgement. Avacyn's Judgement is 1 and a red for a sorcery at rare. It has Madness X red, and it says Avacyn's Judgement deals 2 damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures and or players. If Avacyn's Judgment's Madness cost was paid, it deals X damage divided as you choose among those creatures and or players instead. So 2 mana, 2 damage, potentially split up at sorcery speed isn't that great, but of course if we Madness this, we could do 2 damage for 3 mana at instant speed, which would be totally fine as well. But, you know, I'll take it. It's kind of a slow reality hemorrhage at sorcery speed, but the Madness cost is where I think this thing really shines. With the Madness cost, it's basically a better Fireball. Fireball was, of course, X-red, and you could split it up, but you had to pay for each target that you wanted to split it up. So if you wanted to split 6 damage, 3 and 3, you actually had to pay 7 mana, because you had to pay 1 kind of tax to split it. This lets you split it for free. Yeah, I think this just seems like super solid removal. I love X-red burn spells, because of course they're good on turn 3, they're good on turn 9. They scale very, very well. They scale 1-to-1 as your mana is available. Yeah, this is kind of also one of the key cards that I've always been talking about Madness enablers, where I don't want to pay 3 mana to enable my Madness, because that's 3 less mana that I get to pump into Avacyn's Judgement. So I definitely want to play this with things like Mad Prophet, or things where I'm discarding for little to no mana cost, preferably tapping a creature or attacking with a creature or something like that. That's where I definitely want to pull this off. But I just think this is a super solid removal card. Probably first pick in almost all cases. It's not quite a bomb, but the fact that it can finish off the game just by hitting your opponent's face is just super duper solid. I'm a big fan of Avacyn's Judgement. I think you'll first pick it probably every time, and always, always, always play it. I've got to go with a B+ on it. I like Fireball. I like Avacyn's Judgement. Next up, we have Blood Mad Vampire. Blood Mad Vampire is a 2 and a red 4/1 creature vampire berserker at common, and it says when Blood Mad Vampire deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and Madness 1 and a red. So you can play this a little tiny bit faster if you have a Madness enabler, or you can flash it in. But no haste, and only pseudo-flash if the stars align correctly. Doesn't quite get this there for me. A 4/1 dies to everything. Just everything. As does a 5/2, which this will be when you get the first counter. Even a 6/3 is pretty risky, and dies to basically everything, which you need to get in twice with this thing. If you get this to a 7/4, you're starting to have a creature that's not quite as vulnerable. You also probably should have won the game at that point if you're getting in with this thing that regularly. I just don't think this is going to happen. I think it's way too weak. 4/1s for 3 are not where I want to be spending my mana all that much. Obviously slight extra synergies in the vampire deck and whatnot, but I'm going to cut this more often than not. I've got to go with a C- on it. Next up, we have Breakneck Rider. Breakneck Rider is a 1 red creature, human, scout, werewolf on common. It's a 3/3, and it's got no abilities, just the werewolf one. So at the beginning of each upkeep, if no spells were cast last turn, transport Breakneck Rider. It turns into Neckbreaker, which is kind of a nice mirror of the name. Creature, werewolf, uncommon, 4/3. Attacking creatures you control get +1/+0 and have trample. I think that's going to be forgotten a little bit. And then, of course, it has the flip back werewolf ability, where if any player casts 2 spells, the next upkeep, this transforms back into Breakneck Rider. This seems decent. Seems pretty okay. 3/3 for 3 is okay. The double red hurts it a little tiny bit, but not too much. And this is obviously pushing you into a heavy red deck, and red-green werewolf specifically. Flipping this means your team is suddenly super aggressive. +1/+0 and trample should be pretty darn serious. My slight concern is the reliability of getting this out on turn 3 with the double red, and then flipped on turn 4. which is what you really want to do to have this happen. Of course, you could just pass the turn to flip this, but that is the antithesis of what an aggressive deck wants to be doing. But you can still attack with it and not cast anything, so it's not terrible. Later in the game, I think this falls off a little bit, but it still seems super solid. I don't think it's bomby, and I don't think I would first pick it, but I think it's fine enough, and I think it's an early to mid-pack pick. I've got to go with B- on Breakneck Rider. I like it a fair bit. Next up, we have Burn From Within. Burn From Within is an X-red sorcery at rare. Burn From Within deals X damage to target creature or player. If a creature is dealt damage this way, it loses indestructible until end of turn. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. What was I just saying about how I like Fireball and how I like X-red spells? This is another X-red spell. At rare, unfortunately, so it's not going to be terribly common that you see it, but this is just super cool. Most of it's flavor text and limited. Indestructible isn't super around. There is a way to give werewolves indestructible, and there is the card that gives indestructible a turn, but that's not going to be something you can hit with a sorcery. But it is here or there, but it's generally not going to have too much of an impact. But yeah, this is just cool. I love it. I love X-red burn spells. They scale so well. Early game, if there's a 2/2 that I need dead, I can use this spell. Late game, if there's a 6/6 that needs to be dead, I can use this spell. A couple turns later, if I need to just kill my opponent for 7 damage, I can do that. I just love X-red burn spells. They're so good. They're almost always first pickable. This one certainly is. I've got to go with a solid A- on this. Only minus just because it's not an instant or anything else, but I think that would just be ridiculous if it was an instant. But I got to go with an A- on this, and I'll pick it every single time. Next up, we have Convicted Killer. Convicted Killer is a 2 and a red creature human werewolf at common. It's a 2/2. Again, no abilities, just the werewolf one. So at the beginning of each upkeep, if no spells were cast last turn, transform Convicted Killer. It turns into Branded Howler, a creature werewolf 4/4 with also no abilities, just the flip back ability, where if a player cast 2 or more spells last turn, you transform it. So this is a slightly overcosted bear. It's a 3-drop instead of a 2-drop for a 2/2. And then when it flips over, it's a slightly undercosted 4/4. It costs 3 instead of 4. I guess, this is fine. It's not amazing. I'll play it. I'm not going to, be telling you guys week in, week out about how amazing it was that I played Convicted Killer last night. But I'm also not going to cut it super often. It's just fine. Take it, leave it, middle of the road C. Not really much else to say about it. Next up, we have Dance with the Devils. Dance with the Devils is a 3 and a red instant at uncommon. Put 2 1/1 red devil creature tokens onto the battlefield. They have, when this creature dies, it deals 1 damage to target creature or player. There's a couple of cards that make devils. It looks like they were starting to look at making this a mechanic and then didn't really. This is fine. Making 1/1s for 4 mana. It's not the best of prices to pay. It's not the best of cards that are out there. But the fact that they kind of are 2/2s, and that if they attack and die, they're going to do 2 damage to a creature. If they block, they're going to do 2 damage to a creature. It's fine. It's fine. I'm not super excited about this card, but I think I'm going to give it a go for at least the first couple of weeks. I could see it falling off. I could see it being lower than I have it. I have it at a C+. I think it's much better than Dragon Fodder has been. I'm not super amazed by it, but I think it's fine. C+. I'll play it more often than not to begin with. But I do have my eye on it to drop off possibly, so we'll see. Next up, we have Devil's Playground. 4 red for a sorcery. At rare, put 4 1/1 red devil creature tokens onto the battlefield. They have, when this creature dies, deals 1 damage to target creature or player. You liked 2 of them? Maybe you'll like 4 of them. I don't, though. I certainly do not. 4 mana for 2 of them was already me saying, seems okay, but a little bit overcosted. 6 mana for 4 of them? I don't know. Maybe if you're in a sacrifice deck and you can sacrifice these things to get extra value out of them in addition to the 1 damage, maybe. Dance with the Devils is fine, but Devil's Playground I think is just way too overcosted. I don't really want to be fooling around with this. Maybe pack 2 or pack 3. If I'm already in some sort of sacrifice deck with red, I might take it. But otherwise, I'm not going to play this too often. I've got to go with a D+ on it. I'm going to cut it pretty darn liberally unless I'm in the specific right deck for it. So D+. Next up, we have Dissension in the Ranks. Dissension in the Ranks is 3 red for an instant at uncommon. And it's a weird one. It says target blocking creature fights another target blocking creature. So of course the flavor here is that two people on the same side are suddenly fighting each other. And that's what happens is presumably when you're attacking, you don't want to play this when you're blocking. But you attack and a couple of creatures block. Either they double block your creature or one blocks one and one blocks another. And you say, haha, those two blocking creatures are going to fight each other now. This card is massively overrated. Massively overrated. I've seen people give this B's, B pluses. I think there was some A minuses in the LR community. That's not where this card should be. This card is literally illegal to cast a significant portion of the time. If they're only blocking with one creature, if you're only attacking with one creature and they're only blocking with one creature, if they only have one creature to block with, there's so many situations where you literally cannot cast this. This card is a literal dead card. You can't do anything with it. Then the times that you can do something with it, you're probably going to get to kill one of those creatures. And then the other one will probably die after combat, but it still may result in a trade. People are so best case scenario mentality about this card. They're thinking about those situations where your opponent blocks with two creatures and they're both 3/3s and you get to kill both of them. Those are so rare compared to all of the other times where this only kills one creature or it's literally uncastable. I think this card is terrible. I think it's a skill tester. I think people are going to take this and not quite realize just how rare it is that it's actually going to do anything. I'm out on this card. D-, just super out on this card. Next up, we have Dual Shot, which is a great bit of sort of action in art. You can really feel the action in the movement here. Dual Shot is a single red mana for an instant at common. Dual Shot deals 1 damage to each of up to 2 target creatures. This is not Twin Bolt, which I thought it was. Twin Bolt was 1 and a red to do 2 damage divided as you choose. So you could do 2 damage if you wanted to, or you could do 1 and 1. This only does 1 and 1. This can help finish up some creatures kind of after combat, and maybe you get to hit some X1s here or there. But really, this is a bit of a situational and more of a combat trick than a removal spell, I think. I don't think you should go out of your way to get this, and you should probably cut it more often than not. Don't think of this as removal. Definitely think of it as a combat trick, and not even a good one. You're still probably going to have to trade some creatures in this. Side this in against X1s, but I think you should probably cut it more often than not. I'm going to go with a D+ on it because I do think it should be a little bit more of a sideboard card than anything, so D+. Next up, we have Ember Wolf. Ember Wolf is 1 and a red for a creature wolf at common. It's a 1/2, it's got haste, and for 1 and a red, Ember Wolf gets +2/+0 until end of turn. I'm not a big fan of this. It's very similar to Lava Step Raider from Battle for Zendikar, which was exactly this card, except it didn't have haste, and the fire breathing or the double fire breathing was 2 and a red instead of 1 and a red. So for 1 extra mana, we get a hasty creature that we can pump up for 1 less mana a pump. Not a big fan of it. Not a big fan at all. It's just a 1/2. It's not going to do much work. You're going to have to be pumping mana into it instead of playing creatures in order to get an extra damage, which is not what the aggressive, hasty red deck wants to be doing. Yeah, this is just so far gone from what I like to play in these kinds of decks and what I see is any good. I'll be pretty happy to see these on the other side of the table, I think. Everything you have will block this profitably, and even if they pump a bunch of mana into it, they waste a turn pumping a bunch of mana into it to kill your X2 or your X whatever. Your 2 X's just kill this regardless of how much mana they throw into it. Not a fan of this. I'm out. D-. I don't want to touch Ember Wolf. I think it's just solidly bad. Yes, I saw Kenji play this to some effect in the pre-release that LRR hosted, but yeah, I'm out on it. D-. Next up, we have Falconwrath Gorger. Falconwrath Gorger is a single red mana for a creature vampire berserker at rare. It's a 2/1, and each vampire creature card you own that isn't on the battlefield has madness. The madness cost is equal to its mana cost. So all your vampires in your hand and in your library and in your graveyard and everywhere else has madness. Seems all right. It's a 1-drop 2/1 as well, which is super solid. I think you'll always play this in every single aggressive deck. Giving your vampires madness is really cute. It gives them kind of flash abilities. It doesn't give them any discount, of course, because you have to pay their pure mana cost. And that's where I'm slightly down on this card, is that it's just giving your vampires flash, but clunky flash because you have to have a way to discard them. I'm not super sold on this card for the madness abilities. I'm super sold on it for being a 2-1 for 1. Like, 2-1 for 1s are very nice and aggressive, usually in white, but this one in red I'll play almost all the time. I would definitely, take this and look into doing the black-red vampires deck if I open this pack one, pick one. I just don't think it's as amazing as some people are hoping it to be. I think it's good. And I'm going to go with a B on it. I definitely think it's good. I just don't quite think that it's this absolute massive, always first pick bomb that everybody is expecting it to be. So, B for me. Next up, we have Fiery Temper. Fiery Temper is 1 red for an instant at common. That art is the GP Toronto playmat art, which I will be going to, not to play standard, just to play all the limited side events. And I'm pretty happy to get this on a playmat. But anyways, Fiery Temper deals 3 damage to target player or creature. Madness, single red. So if you can madness this, it's Lightning Bolt. And Lightning Bolt is super good. If you have not played with it, it is just ridiculously good. 1 red for this ability is not as good. The red's pretty tricky, but still definitely doable. And at instant speed, you can't not say no to this. Or I think I used an extra negative in there. You can't say no to this. It's just super duper solid. This is probably first pickable as a common in a weak pack where your rare is something bad like Behold the Beyond or something. Super solid. You will always play these. You'll play these in multiples, and if you're in Madness, you're going to be super happy being able to jam this out at instant speed and play Lightning Bolt for the first time in quite a long time in Limited. I've got to go with B+. I really, really like Fiery Temper. Next up, we have Flameblade Angel. Flameblade Angel is a 4 red creature angel at rare. It's a 4/4 flyer, and whenever a source an opponent controls deals damage to you or a permanent you control, you may have Flameblade Angel deal 1 damage to that source's controller. Nifty. This is also going to come down way too late for me. 4 red's a hard mana cost, and, it's slightly contrary to what red usually wants to do. This probably fits a little bit more in a red-green deck that goes a little bit more late game than something like a red-black deck or a red-white deck that wants to, be really aggressive and finish the game before 6 drops are a common thing to be happening. It's a 4/4 flyer, which is nice enough, and that ability is okay, but it does seem kind of minimal to me. Some people will win games from the pings and declare this amazing, but I just don't think it's consistent enough for that. I'd be wary going all in on this early, just because I do think it's a little bit expensive. But, if you put it down, you've got a 4/4 flyer, which is pretty solid and should start putting the game away unless they have an immediate answer. I am going to start a little bit conservative on it, as I do often with 4XX spells, 6 mana drops. So, I'm going to go with C+ on it. Probably a B- is a little bit more appropriate, but we'll see if it gets any bigger than that. But 6 drops are hard. 6 drops are really, really hard to justify unless they are just total game enders right away. Next up, we have Gatstaff Arsonists. Gatstaff Arsonists are 4 and a red for a creature human werewolf at common. It's a 5/4 with no abilities. At the beginning of each upkeep, if no spells were cast last turn, transform Gatstaff Arsonists. I always say goblin because the guy there looks like a goblin, but it's just kind of his camouflage war paint, I think. Anyways, they flip into Gatstaff Ravagers. Gatstaff Ravagers are a creature werewolf, 6/5 with menace and the flip back werewolf ability. There's a lot of vanilla werewolves in this, or French vanilla werewolves. This just feels kind of like a boring curve topper, similar to a lot of the big, dumb red-green 5-drops that are out there, or 6-drops or 7-drops. Take it if you don't find a true bomb. If you don't find your amazing end the game flyer or whatever, go ahead and take this as your sort of conservative. The draft didn't go quite as well, but maybe you've got a lot of removal or early stuff kind of curve topper. But if you've got something better, you don't really have to play this. So it's really a middle-of-the-road C for me. Next up, we have Gyre Reach Bandit. Gyre Reach Bandit is 2 and a red for a creature human rogue werewolf at rare. It's a 3/2. It's got haste. And at the beginning of each upkeep, if no spells were cast last turn, transform Gyre Reach Bandit, which I'm going to start shortening to werewolf flippability or something like that. It flips into Vilden Pack Alpha. Vilden Pack Alpha is a creature werewolf at rare. It's a 4/3. Whenever a werewolf enters the battlefield under your control, you may transform it. And then it has the flip back werewolf ability. This is really kind kind of cool. It's really kind of cool. It's a 3/2 haste for 3, which is pretty darn playable. Red aggressive decks really want to have that. When it flips, it becomes a really interesting werewolf lord of sorts. It's not a lord. It doesn't give +1/+1. But it does allow you to flip your werewolves immediately, which is really cool. Beyond that, they still enter the battlefield. So any enter the battlefield effects from the front face happen. And then you transform it. And then any on transform effects will happen. I really like this. It's really kind of cool. I would be actually pretty happy first picking this and trying to go into the red-green werewolves deck. And even if I don't, I still end up with a very hasty, aggressive creatures. This will play, pretty solidly in the black-red vampires deck just as a 3/2 haste for 3. It'll play basically in every red deck totally fine, but it will really, of course, shine when you have a whole bunch of werewolves in red-green. I'm pretty happy with this card. I would first pick it a good deal of the time. It's not a bomb by the exact definitions, but I'm pretty happy giving this a B. Next up, we have the real Geistblasters. We have Geistblast. It's 2 and a red for an instant at uncommon. Geistblast deals 2 damage to target creature or player. Pay 2 and a blue, exile Geistblast from your graveyard. Copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. Yeah. So we just learned in Battle for Zendikar that we'll pay 2 mana to play Shock. Will we pay 3 mana to play Shock? Probably. Unfortunately, we will. 3 mana, instant speed, 2 damage. They are starting to ask an awful lot of us. I don't even know why this is 3 mana. The ability doesn't come into play until it's in the graveyard. I guess that's worth a full mana. It doesn't really feel like it, considering I still have to pay 2 and a blue to do the exile and copy ability, but I think we will still begrudgingly play this, but it's getting a little bit ridiculous just how far away we're getting from Shock. The card seems fine. You'll play it because you have to, because this is how you get 2 damage at instant speed these days. The 2 and a blue copy is neither here nor there. You know my usual rant. You don't have that many instants and sorceries, and the instants and sorceries that you really want to copy will probably cost a bit, so the odds of you having 2 and a blue aren't going to be good. Sometimes the stars will align and you'll get that extra value out of it, and that'll be cool, but I wouldn't count on it. I wouldn't expect that to be a thing that's always going to happen. But when it's there, it's a cool little bonus. Yeah, I'm going to go C+ on this. Man, I miss Shock. I really miss Shock. For those who don't know, Shock is a single red mana, 2 damage creature creature or player at instant speed. We're getting so far away from Shock, but C+. Shock, please come back to us. Next up, we have Gibbering Fiend. Gibbering Fiend is 1 and a red for a creature devil at uncommon. It's a 2/1. When it enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. It has Delirium. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, if you have Delirium, Gibbering Fiend deals 1 damage to that player. So it's a 2/1 for 2, which pings, and then each turn after that, if you have Delirium, it pings again. Fine enough for an aggressive deck. A 2/1 with a guaranteed 1 point of damage for 2 isn't too terrible. There's better cards out there for sure. Delirium, if it's online, which, you know my Delirium rant by now, it'll be okay. It'll be an extra 1 damage. But in an aggressive deck, I think this is fine. I just don't think it's terribly exciting. I think it's a super middle-of-the-road C. If it was a 2/2, I might push it up to C+, but as a 2/1, it is super, super, super vulnerable to a ton of things. So I'm just going to go middle-of-the-road C. I'll play it, I'll cut it, I'll do both things, and I think that will generally be the correct answer in various situations. Next up, we have Gold Knight Castigator. Gold Knight Castigator is a weird one. It's 2 red for a creature angel, 4/9 at Mythic. It has flying, it has haste. If a source would deal damage to you, it deals double that damage instead. If a source would deal damage to Gold Knight Castigator, it deals double that damage to Gold Knight Castigator instead. So yeah, it's a 4/9 flying haste for 4. Crazy! Except now you're going to take twice as much damage as normal, and Gold Knight Castigator takes twice as much damage as normal. So it's not actually a 4/9, it's more realistically a 4/4.5. 4.5 damage will kill this thing. Yeah, this is weird. This is really, really weird. You need to be pretty certain that you're the beatdown in this matchup. You need to be pretty certain that you're attacking all the time and your opponent is not. The Angel's not very good in almost any situation other than you being ahead as well, which makes this feel a little bit win-more to me. It blocks pretty well, at least up to 4/4s or 4Xs, which is a sizable amount, but anything bigger will still kill it. I don't know where I want to go with this. I don't know if I want to play this all that regularly or not. If I first picked it, I'd have to make absolute certain that I was going to be the most aggressive person at that pod. I would need to make sure that this was kind of my curve topper, that I was massively heavy 2-drops and 3-drops. And this was my curve topper. It feels similar to Inverter of Truth, but slightly more playable because you don't suddenly put yourself on like a 6 or 7 turn clock of decking yourself. But yeah, I don't know. I want to play with it. I definitely want to play with it. If I get it, I probably will take it and play it the first time. But I don't know where it's going to end up. I'm going to go with a cautious B- on it. But I'm definitely going to keep my eye on it, see where it ends up. Being a mythic, there's a decent chance I just will never get to play with it. But I'm going to go with B-. Next up, we have Harness the Storm. Harness the Storm is 2 and a red for an enchantment at rare. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell from your hand, you may cast target card with the same name as that spell from your graveyard. F-? Absolute F- in limited. You're just never going to use this. You're never going to use this. How often do you have 2 copies of an instant or sorcery in your deck? Very, 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 very rare. And the times that you do, they're usually not that exciting because clearly nobody else at the table is drafting them. Yeah, Harness the Storm is not meant for limited. It's clearly meant for constructed, maybe for possibly Storm in Modern or various other decks. But yeah, this is probably the worst rare you could open, and it should, I think, always be the last pick. It's just an F-. You shouldn't be playing this card in limited. Just bad. Next up, we have Howlpack Wolf, which I'm always going to call Howlpack Alpha, which is the flip side of Mayor of Avabruck, which is weird because I never remember the flip side of cards' names, but for some reason that one sticks in my head. Anyways, Howlpack Wolf is 2 and a red for a creature wolf common 3/3. Howlpack Wolf can't block unless you control another wolf or a werewolf. So it's a 3/3 for 3 that can't block in red. I would play that. Even if I could never turn off that downside, I would play that. It's a 3/3 for 3 in red. That's aggressive. That's perfectly on curve. You're going to be getting in for a lot of damage. If you're in red-green, it can probably block. Even if you're in red anything and you have other werewolves, this thing can block. And that's cool. The fact that I would play this even if I could never turn the downside off just totally sells me on this card. The fact that I can turn the downside off sometimes, hopefully it's not that relevant because I want to be in the aggressive deck with this card, and who's blocking in an aggressive red deck? You're attacking. Totally solid. Not splashy or amazing, but totally solid. I'll play this probably every time I have it. I won't go to my way to get it. It's just a C+, but I'll play every copy that I have. Next up, we have Hulking Devil. Hulking Devil is 3 and a red for a creature devil at common. It's a 5/2, absolutely no rules text. So it is Cobble Brute. Cobble Brute is from Return to Ravnica. It's 3 and a red for a 5/2 creature elemental, I think, with no flavor text, and it was bad. And Hulking Devil is just as bad. Cobble Brute, you should never have played it. 2 mana just dies to everything, especially things that cost half the mana that you put into Cobble Brute or Hulking Devil, which I'm always going to call Hulking Brute, I think, just because I mistakenly wrote it that way in my set review the first time I was writing my notes because I was thinking of Cobble Brute, and it just makes sense. Anyways, this just dies to everything. It's bad. It's a waste of 4 mana. Just do not do this. Do not play this. Generally, I'll say, if you desperately need a creature, you can play this creature. You shouldn't do this. You should just play whatever combat trick you have instead. This is just bad. Total F. Next up, we have Incorrigible Youths. Incorrigible Youths is 3 red for a creature vampire 4/3 at uncommon. It has haste and it has madness for 2 and a red. So a pretty sizable discount here. We haven't actually seen too many big discount madness cards yet. We've seen a lot of different effects or same costs but allowing you to cast them at instant speed, but this is a pretty sizable cost. Becoming a 4/3 for 3 haste is a lot better than a 4/3 for 5 with haste. Getting haste on a 4/3 doesn't quite make me want to pay 5 mana all that much. I don't know that I super want to cast this card for its regular mana cost. It wouldn't be terrible, but getting haste on a big creature, unless it has flying or evasion or some crazy effect, isn't that good because there's generally going to be blockers, especially when the toughness is so weak down at 3. So I'm not sold on this being a great card for its non-madness cost. For its madness cost, I think it's fairly solid. If you can get this out as a 3-drop, I think you're in good shape. So on turn 3, if you have some sort of free discard outlet, I think this is solid. And this is a decent card to really sort of hit home how much I think you need those really cheap, if not free, discard outlets. Because if you have to pay 2 mana to discard something, you're not casting this until turn 5, which is the normal place you would cast this if it didn't have madness. So that's why I think the free madness or the free discard outlets are where the really is required to have madness become a super good thing. Overall, I think this card's fine. I think you do really want to play this for its madness cost more than anything else. And if you can't, I think it's a very mediocre creature. So I'm going to go C+ on it, with, of course, the caveat that you want to have this in the madness deck. You want to have madness enablers. If you don't, it's lower than that. Next up, we have Inner Struggle, also known as Stop Punching Yourself. 3 in a red for an instant at uncommon. Target creature deals damage to itself equal to its power. The creature punches itself. Yeah, this is cool. This is really cool design. I really like it. We haven't had a fight yourself kind of card yet. Seems like decent enough removal. It's conditional in that you can't kill things that have higher toughness than power, but still, it should hit a pretty serious amount of things. Even if it does have more toughness, you could still kill it post-combat. 4 mana is slightly costly, but still totally and utterly playable. The instant speed ability is what makes this really, really solid. Probably just a tiny, tiny step below solid premium removal. I'll always play the first one, I think, probably even the second one. I've just got to go with a solid B on Stop Punching Yourself. Next up, we have Insolent Neonate. Insolent Neonate is a single red mana for a 1/1 creature vampire at common. It has menace. You can discard a card and sacrifice Insolent Neonate to draw a card. Yeah, so it's a 1/1 for 1, which isn't terribly playable. It's a 1/1 for 1 with menace, which still isn't terribly playable. Really where this shines is discard a card, sacrifice it, and draw a card. So it replaces itself, which is pretty handy. And it's discard. It's a free discard outlet. That you could have on turn 1, which is nice. This would be great to go turn 1 Insolent Neonate, turn 2 something, turn 3 discard, and then cast Incorrigible Youths. Get in for 4. That would be a pretty solid play. Outside of that play, I don't think this is very good. I don't know. I would look to take this really late, really, really, really late, pack 2, pack 3, when you know that you're in the madness deck and you really want to enable madness, and the madness that you want to enable requires you to have a lot of mana up. Other than that, I think this is pretty unplayable, like a lot of 1/1s for 1 are. I just don't want to play this all that often. I've got to go with a D on it. Even in the madness deck, I just feel like there's better ways of going about it. But this will lead to some pretty explosive kind of first 3 turns for some decks. But in general, I think I've got to go with a D. Next up, we have Kecak Forgemaster. Kecak Forgemaster is 1 in a red for a creature, human, shaman, werewolf at uncommon. It's a 2/1. Whenever Kecak Forgemaster blocks or becomes blocked by a creature, Kecak Forgemaster deals 1 damage to that creature. It's got the werewolf flip ability, where it becomes a Flameheart Werewolf, which is a creature werewolf at uncommon. It's a 3/2. Whenever Flameheart Werewolf blocks or becomes blocked by a creature, Flameheart Werewolf deals 2 damage to that creature. And it has the flip back ability. So there was a card in Innistrad called Ashmouth Hound. Ashmouth Hound was a totally fine card. It was the front face of this card. Every single thing was the same, except it wasn't a werewolf. It didn't flip. It was a 2/1 for 2 that did the ping if it blocks or becomes blocked. And it was totally fine. Because it kind of it swings above its weight class, to use a boxing kind of reference there. I don't know why I don't know anything about boxing. But anyways, it swings above. It's sort of a 3/1, because if it attacks and becomes blocked, it does 3 damage to something. The fact that this flips over and becomes a 3/2 that starts hitting 4, or sorry, not 4, it hits for 5, because it, of course, double pings. It does 2. Just seems super solid. I really like this card. It's nice and aggressive, and it has some utility and becomes better later in the game when people stop casting spells every turn. Yeah, I'm really, really happy with Kecak Forgemaster. I'm going to play the first one every single time. I would play multiples if I could get them. I don't think you are going to get them terribly often, but I think this is just super solid. B-. I really like Kecak Forgemaster. Next up, we have Lightning Axe. Lightning Axe is a single red mana for an instant at common, and it says Lightning Axe deals 5 damage to target creature. Seems pretty good, doesn't it? Well, there's a little bit more. As an additional cost to cast Lightning Action, discard a card or pay 5. Still seems pretty darn good. Discarding a card to do 5 damage to a creature at instant speed for a single red mana is ridiculous. That is so good. Even if this wasn't a Madness set, that is still super good. Throwing away a land, throwing away a card that just doesn't matter to do 5 damage at instant speed to a creature is just insane. So good. So happy with that. The fact that if I don't have a card or late in the game, I could pay 5 in a red is okay. I don't generally want to pay 6 mana to do 5 damage, but I would if I had to, or if there was a card that I wanted to keep in my hand. But man, this just kills almost everything for such a tiny cost and enables madness for such a tiny cost that this just seems absolutely ridiculous. This is going to be first pickable in packs where the rare kind of sucks a little bit. Man, this is just so good. B+ on it. Not quite an A- just because it's not quite unconditional removal. You can't kill X6s. You can't kill things that get a combat trick played on them, whereas something like Angelic Purge would kill it, or any sort of flat out destroy removal. But still, super solid. B+. Take this highly. Play as many as you can, and in Madness you want a lot of these. Next up, we have Mad Prophet. Mad Prophet is 3 in a red for a creature human shaman at uncommon. It's a 2/2 with haste. Tap, discard a card, draw a card. Yeah, this is decent. This was in Avacyn Restored, and it was pretty okay there. The fact that it's a madness enabler for free, tap, discard a card, draw a card. It's even better than free. You're getting a card for discarding that card. Seems super solid. I think this is amazing in the Madness deck. Outside of the Madness deck, it's fine. It's a 2/2 that could be aggressive, although on turn 4, it's probably not going to get to swing in. But more than that, it is a Rummager, and Rummagers are pretty okay. They're not looters. Looters are good. Rummagers are just okay. But this guy just seems totally fine, and I think he's going to be key in the Madness deck. Just to hit that home, this used to be a common. This is a common in a non-Madness set. In a Madness set, they had to ramp this up to uncommon because it would be kind of broken if everybody had a play set of these in their draft deck. Yeah, I think you take this pretty highly once you're in the Madness deck, once you have reasons to go into it. But I think you play this pretty happily, even if you're not in Madness. So kind of a split grade here, C+, B+, depending on what deck you're in. C+ for most, B+ for Madness. Yeah, Mad Prophet, pretty solid. Next up, we have Magmatic Chasm. Magmatic Chasm is 1 in a red for a sorcery at common. Creatures without flying can't block this turn. Not that good. It wasn't really playable in Dragons. It's not really playable here. It's known as a Falter effect. I think Falter was the first card that did this. Magmatic Chasm is kind of the new version of that, the new title of that. It's used in a lot of sets nowadays. You could maybe think of some really wonky sideboard situations where this would work, but even then, it's not terribly likely. Every now and then, the stars align and it's right to sideboard this, and it does help you, but generally, this is kind of like a D-. So, don't main deck this, but keep it in mind if you do happen to have it in your pool. Next up, we have Malevolent Whispers. Malevolent Whispers is 3 in a red for a sorcery at uncommon. Gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap that creature. It gets +2/+0 and gains haste until end of turn. Madness, 3 in a red. So Madness is the same cost, so it just gives it instant speed. So right away, let's learn my lesson from Turn Against. This can be an instant threaten effect, which can be pretty good. It's not insane, as we learned from Turn Against. People will play around it. This was the card, however, that made me realize that, wow, predicting what tricks people have is going to be insanely hard when they have a discard outlet sitting on the table. Because suddenly all the sorceries in the set that have Madness are suddenly tricks that might be played at instant speed during combat. It's going to require a pretty good memory and a pretty good study of the set to remember exactly everything that they could possibly have that could impact combat. Yeah, without Madness, this is a pretty typical threaten effect. The +2/+0 is nice, but, it's pretty typical. It's fine enough to play if you want to. You don't have to. I wouldn't fault you either way. I personally tend to avoid threaten effects pretty heavily. I rarely play them, but I know they are good, and I do get blown out by them here and there. With instant speed, you can do all kinds of combat shenanigans with it. You can take a creature and force a trade of their own creatures and stuff like that. Seems decent, not amazing. Slightly worse than Turn Against, I'd say, because the instant speed isn't always turned on like it is with Turn Against. But, if you have a Madness Outlet, I think it's fairly okay. C+, I'm probably not going to play it terribly often, but I think the correct rating is around C+. Next up, we have Pyrrha Hound. Pyrrha Hound is 3 and a red for a creature elemental hound at common. It's a 2/3, it has trample, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, put a +1/+1 counter on Pyrrha Hound. This is a cool little guy. 2/3 for 4 is expensive. 3/4 for 4 is still a little bit expensive. 4/5 for 4 is where this starts to get a bit serious, but it's going to take some serious work to get there. I doubt you'll ever go off quite as often as you hope with this thing, just because you're not going to be playing a billion instants and sorceries. I do want to keep my eye open for a red-blue instant and sorcery deck. Geistblast kind of goes into there. The blue spell that makes zombies goes into there. The red spells that make devils goes into there. I want to keep my eye open for that deck, because this could be part of it. I think that could be a cool deck. It may not be consistent enough. It may not be good enough, but I do want to keep my eye open, and this has a place in that deck. Outside of that deck, in your a regular draft red deck, you're going to have, 4 to 6 instant sorceries. You're going to have to draw them and play them after this guy has come down. So odds are this isn't going to get up to a 4/5 all that regularly. I think it's okay. I'll definitely give this guy a go, and I'll keep an eye on it, especially for that potential Is It Spells deck. But for now, I'm just going to go with kind of a C on it. I think a C-, just because its vanilla stats just are bad, and its first counter still isn't all that good. It's going to take 2 counters to make this really good. So C- to start, but I'm going to keep an eye on this for that potential red-blue deck. Next up, we have Ravenous Bloodseeker. Ravenous Bloodseeker is 1 and a red for a creature vampire berserker. It's an uncommon, it's a 1/3, and you can discard a card, and Ravenous Bloodseeker gets +2/-2 until end of turn. Hey look, another free Madness Enabler. I'm pretty happy with that. As a note, you probably don't really want to do this, but you could discard as many cards as you want to this thing to maybe enable Delirium or something like that. This won't die after the second discard as long as you hold priority. Probably not really ever going to come up, but it is an option. You're really going to be using this as a Madness Enabler. You're probably not going to be using this just as a super aggressive thing. It might be okay. It might be something to do. Play this turn 2. If they don't match a 2-drop, you could just discard a card to get in for 4 or 3. Wouldn't be the worst thing. It's probably not the best thing either. Overall, I think it's an okay card, and I think you could play it in most decks and not be super upset, but definitely in the Madness deck or in the Vampire deck, I think this gets a little bit higher. I think I'll kind of average it out to a C. In a non-Vampire deck, I'm going to cut this probably a little bit more often than not, and in a Vampire deck or a Madness deck specifically, I'm going to probably play this a little bit more often than I would otherwise. But so I'll average it out to a C. It seems fun. This is kind of one of the free discard outlets that I was looking for. Next up, we have Reduced to Ashes. Reduced to Ashes is 4 and a red for a sorcery at common. Reduced to Ashes deals 5 damage to target creature. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. Seems fine enough. 5 mana for 5 damage at sorcery speed is okay. It's not amazing. It's not going to save you if you stumble early in the game and you can't quite get to 5, but it's fine enough. The exile clause doesn't really do much. It turns off, or it stops your opponent from getting delirium from that creature, but stopping creatures from going to the graveyard isn't the way to stop delirium, because there's going to be a bunch of creatures in the graveyard. This is fine removal. It's Boulder Salvo +1 damage without the ability to make it cheaper. Seems fine. You'll play the first one. You probably shouldn't play the second one. C+, take it kind of mid to late pick, I think. Next up, we have Rush of Adrenaline. Rush of Adrenaline is a single red mana for an instant at common. It says target creature gets +2/+1 and gains trample until end of turn. So it's a slightly worse brute strength. It's not terrible, but it's not really spectacular. The +X and trample spells live or die on the power increase, really. And 2 is just a fair bit weaker than 3. Brute strength wasn't amazing either, but it was a solid C, maybe even a C+, but probably a C more accurately. This, though, is just a little bit too underpowered for me. I think I'm going to drop it down to a C-. I'll rarely play this over other potential tricks or just another creature, but sometimes it'll be fine. It's just +2/+1 for a single creature isn't that great. It's a single red mana, which is nice. Keep in mind that if you're attacking into something or they're attacking and they do have 1 mountain back, but otherwise I think you should cut this a little bit more often than not. C-. Next up, we have Singuinary Mage. Singuinary Mage is a 1 and a red creature vampire wizard at common. She's a 1/3 and she's got prowess. That's about it. I really don't care for 1/3s with prowess for 2. Jeskai Student was the exact same thing in white in Concept Arceer, and it never really did anything. You know my prowess rant by now. Instant sorcery, non-creature spells don't make up that big of a portion of your deck, so you trigger prowess usually 3 times in a game, and you have to have the creature down in order for prowess to even trigger. Yeah, it's just not that good. It's not what a 2-drop wants to do. It's not what a red 2-drop wants to do, especially red wants to be very aggressive almost always, and a 1/3 just doesn't quite do that. It's a vampire, so it's got that going for it, but I think you'll cut this more often than not, even in the vampire deck. C-, not a huge fan. Next up, we have Scourge Wolf. Scourge Wolf is a red creature wolf horror at rare. It's a 2/2. It's got first strike. It also has delirium. Scourge Wolf has double strike as long as you have delirium. Yeah, this seems fine as long as you're heavy red. Also, it kind of depends on the ease of delirium. A 3/3 first strike for red is very solid if you're heavy red. If you know you're usually going to have mountain on turn 2, 3/3 first strike is fantastic. Very, very, very solid. It's going to get in for a lot of damage and really help you be massively aggressive. Less so if red is not your majority color. If delirium is also relatively often on, then this gets even better. I can't imagine this will ever be a double striker before turn 5 or later, though. So it's not like you're going to have a turn 2 double striker or a turn 3 double striker. But even as a 3/3 first striker for 2, I think it's totally fine. Totally slots into the aggressive red decks, and I think I'm pretty happy giving this a B-. B- just because it is double red, so it only fits into heavy red decks, and you can get screwed out of being able to play this early. But yeah, B-. Next up, we have Senseless Rage. Senseless Rage is 1 and a red for an enchantment or a common enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2, madness, 1 and a red. So it's Goblin Warpaint, but no haste, and you can maybe use this as a combat trick that sticks around now and then. Doesn't seem terribly worth it. If you want a 23rd card, here it is, but I think I'm going to cut this most of the time. It's just not hugely impactful. In the aggressive red deck, yeah, you could go for it. I think you're going a little bit all in on your creatures, but it could be playable. Ultimately, I think it's just a C-. Cut it more often than not, but you can play it if you really want to, or you want to be hyper aggressive. Next up, we have Sin Prodder. Sin Prodder is 2 and a red for a creature devil at rare. It's a 3/2. It's got menace, and at the beginning of your upkeep, reveal the top card of your library. Any opponent may have you put that card into your graveyard. If a player does, Sin Prodder deals damage to that player equal to that card's converted mana cost. Otherwise, put that card into your hand. It's a weird, reverse-ish Dark Confidant. Very strange. This definitely has kind of the random red feeling to it, but I think the card advantage will just win out on it. 3/2 menace for 3 is fine. Boggart Brute was pretty solid in Magic Origins. I think this is going to be pretty solid as a 3/2 menace. So at the start of your turn, you have to show your opponent your top card, which is a little bit of a downside, and they can choose to have you not draw it and take the CMC as a damage. That sucks for cheap utility spells. I guess it's a good thing Shock isn't in the set because, yeah, everybody's going to take 1 damage to get rid of Shock. But they're not necessarily going to take 3 damage to get rid of Shock or 5 damage to get rid of removal spells, things like that. But your cheap utility spells, your cheap decent creatures are probably not going to be going to your hand. In addition, you generally don't play too many 5, 6, 7 drops, so you're probably not going to be flipping over massive bombs turn after turn after turn, and your opponent's making super problematic choices as to whether or not to take the damage or let you have the crazy creature. Yeah, if your opponent keeps doing that and keeps taking away your utility spells and your 2-drops and 3-drops, they are going to be getting themselves lower and lower in the life total, and you still get your blind draw after the extra draw or discard that happens off the top of this. It'll be interesting to see how much equity is given away by the fact that you do have to show your card every single turn, and they get that choice. I doubt it's going to be high enough to worry about it ultimately. I think the card advantage is going to win out for sure. I'm pretty happy with it. I'm going to give it a B+. I think I'll first pick it probably every time, and I think it's going to be super solid. Just be careful, don't get into best case scenario mentality. Don't jam your deck full of 6-drops because my opponent's going to take 6, because they're just going to make you draw that 6-drop over and over, and you're not going to get to cast them. Be careful. Don't get too excited about this. Don't think it's going to be just killing your opponent in a couple of turns, but I think it is solid. B+. Next up, we have Skin Invasion. Skin Invasion is a single red mana for an enchantment aura at uncommon enchant creature. Enchanted creature attacks each combat if able. When enchanted creature dies, return Skin Invasion to the battlefield transformed under your control. The flip side of this is Skin Shredder, a creature insect horror that is a 3/4 with no abilities. So it's a parasite that kind of throws onto a creature. When that creature dies, it bursts out as this Skin Shredder beast insect horror dealy. I'm not too excited about this. It's being super overrated right now. I've seen people giving this A, and I just don't see it. So your opponent puts down some piddly 2-drop. You throw this on it. It attacks each turn of Fable. Hopefully you've played something that can block and kill it at some point, and in exchange you get yourself a vanilla 3/4. So? I just feel like putting this in your deck is such a cost without even a guaranteed payoff, and the payoff isn't all that amazing, that I think it's just not that great. I just think it's not that great. And you need to make sure that you have something that can block and kill that creature. And that might take you a turn or two. That might take you a turn or two to get there. I don't see this being that good. It's a lot of work, and it's a full card to get a 3/4. On turn probably 3 or 4, when a 3/4 would come out anyways. Doesn't seem that good. I think I'd rather just prefer a creature that's always going to be a creature the turn that I cast it. Not a big fan. I'm going to go with a middle-of-the-road C on this. I think you can play it if you want to, and I think you can cut it if you want to. I just don't think it's the B's and the A's that I see some people giving this, so C. Next up, we have Spiteful Motives. Spiteful Motives is 3 and a red for an enchantment aura at uncommon. It has Flash instead of Madness. Enchanted creature gets +3/+0 and has first strike. Auras, they're getting a little bit good in this set. The problem with auras is that you open yourself up to getting 2 for 1. You spend an entire card and often an entire turn, or at least part of a turn, or part of your mana, to put something on a creature, and that creature may just die, and then you lose 2 cards out of it. Flash enchantments are a little bit better because they function as combat tricks that stick around. So you at least get, hopefully, as long as they don't respond with removal, you hopefully get at least that first bit of value out of the aura, and then it potentially sticks around to give you more and more out of it. +3/+0 in first strike is pretty solid. That's Sure Strike. And Sure Strike was a playable combat trick. This is twice the cost of Sure Strike, but it does stick around. I'll still probably cut this quite a bit, but I could see myself main decking it here and there. Enough for it to be a C, for it to be a full C, not even a C-. I'm going to have to keep an eye on enchantments this set. They're looking decent-ish. Next up, we have Stensia Masquerade. Stensia Masquerade is 2 and a red for an enchantment. It's an uncommon. Attacking creatures you control have first strike. Whenever a vampire you control deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on it. And Madness 2 and a red, so you can flash it in for its regular mana cost. It's way better in vampires, obviously. But at the same time, if your creatures are getting in unimpeded, you probably just want more creatures because you're clearly ahead. You're clearly in a better position than your opponent if you're already getting your creatures through for damage. Getting first strike to your creatures is nice. That potentially, helps you get through more than you might not if they didn't have first strike. Being able to flash it in is a little bit okay. You can hopefully surprise your opponent and, get first strike before the declare blocker step is over. But slow enchantments that take your turn are just the absolute opposite of what an aggro deck wants to do, and this wants to be in an aggro deck, so I think it's really at odds with what you should be doing. I'm going to go with a C- on it. I just don't think it's ultimately quite that playable. It's obviously better in vampires, but not too much better, so C-. Next up, we have Structural Distortion. Structural Distortion is 3 and a red for a sorcery at common. Exile target artifact or land. Structural Distortion deals 2 damage to that permanent's controller. No. No, 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 no. There's just not enough artifacts that are, oh my god, I need to deal with this level of artifact, and same with lands. And for the mana cost of 4 mana and its sorcery speed, blah. This is constructed. This is for modern or something like that. And even there's better spells than this to use, and better lands to use than this for that matter. I think this is just absolutely unplayable as a main deck card in this draft format. Sideboarded in if there's some reason that you have to get rid of something. Maybe you really have to get rid of the Westvale Abbey that we'll talk about in a few days. But otherwise, sideboard, and it should probably stay there. D-. Next up, we have Tormenting Voice. Tormenting Voice is 1 and a red for a sorcery at common. As an additional cost to cast Tormenting Voice, discard a card, draw 2 cards. We've, of course, seen this very recently in Dragons of Tarkir and Khans of Tarkir, and now it's back and better because discarding a card is not a downside anymore. All of the time, at least. Tormenting Voice was always sort of playable. It wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. I personally avoided it usually, but it was fine. It wasn't incorrect to play it or anything. Obviously, it's a bit better with Madness, but you know the drill. Paying 2 to discard a card is going to hurt the mana that you have left to cast that Madness card. Helps Delirium, but again, I don't like the idea of discarding cards all willy-nilly just to enable Delirium. I want to cast my cards and have them go to the graveyard. I don't want to just throw them away to enable Delirium. I feel like that's giving away value. Usually this card's kind of a middle-of-the-road C. This set I'm willing to go up to a C+, but still probably won't play it too much. Next up, we have Ulrichs Kindred. Ulrichs Kindred is 2 and a red for a creature wolf at uncommon. It's got trample, it's a 3/2, and for 3 and a green, target attacking wolf or werewolf gains indestructible until end of turn. So we've got ourselves a 3 mana 3/2 with trample. That's okay, but not amazing. I prefer 3/2s for 3 with haste or with first strike, but trample's all right. Obviously, it's pretty good in red-green werewolves where you can pay 4 mana. 4 mana? 3 mana? What did I say? 4 mana. Where you can pay 4 mana to give a creature indestructible in your deck, or most of your creatures anyways, which is nice. Outside of that deck, I think this is just pure filler. In that deck, I think it's a little bit better. I'm going to go with a C+ on it. I think it's fine enough, and I think you'll play it a little tiny bit more often than not, and obviously you'll always play it in red-green, so C+. Next up, we have Uncaged Fury. Uncaged Fury is 2 and a red for an instant at common. Target creature gets +1/+1 and gains double strike until end of turn. So Temur Battle Rage was a pretty good card in Dragons of Tarkir, Fate Reforged. I can't remember what set it was in, but the last block before battle anyways. And it just gave double strike. And if you had Ferocious, which is if you had 8 power on the board, then it gave Trample as well. I think the Trample was a really big part of Temur Battle Rage, because even if they blocked your creature, you still probably got through for some damage. This, if they block your creature, you're not getting through for any damage whatsoever. So this is less of a blowout than I think Temur Battle Rage will be, but the +1/+1 bonus is a little bit more of a blowout if you do put this on an unblocked creature. So I think it's fine. I think it's a fine combat trick. It'll probably perform a little bit better than not, and I'll certainly get blown out by it at some point, but I think it is just a middle-of-the-road C. Next up, we have the Red Vessel, Vessel of Volatility. Vessel of Volatility is 1 and a red for enchantment at common. Pay 1 and a red, sacrifice Vessel of Volatility. Add red to your mana pool. That is 4 red. This is bad. This is bad. You put 4 mana into this thing to get 4 mana out. You have a net 0 benefit from this card. You get to enable Delirium, I guess, but big whoop. There's so many better ways to do that. I think this is unplayable. I think this is just a flat out F. Just seems horrible. I am never going to play this card, and I am going to love every single time I see someone play this card on turn 2. Meanwhile, I'll be playing a 2/2 and hitting them in the face. This is just bad. Straight up F. You should never touch this card. Time for another werewolf. We've got Village Messenger, a single red mana for a 1/1 creature human werewolf at uncommon. It has haste, and at the beginning of each upkeep, if no spells were cast last turn, transform Village Messenger. On the flip side, we have Moonrise Intruder, a 2/2 creature werewolf with menace and the flip back ability. Seems fine. Reckless Waif was totally playable in an aggressive deck in Innistrad, and this is nearly identical except it has haste, and the flip side is a menace 2-2 instead of a vanilla 3-2. I think it's totally playable. It obviously falls off a whole lot in the late game. Turn 1, though, your opponent's going to have to stabilize pretty fast, because you're going to hit them for 1 on turn 1. Turn 2, if they don't play anything, you get in. If you don't play anything, this flips, and suddenly they're going to have 2 blockers to block your 2-2, and you're going to get in a lot of early damage. It falls off a ton in the late game, as I said, so I'm not going to go any higher than a C+, but I am pretty happy giving it a C+. Next up, we've got Voltaren Duelist. Voltaren Duelist is 3 in a red and has art that I can't quite figure out what's happening. Creature Vampire Warrior at common. It's a 3-2. It's got haste, and when Voltaren Duelist enters the battlefield, target creature can't block this turn. 3-2 haste that can hopefully turn off the thing that could block and kill it the turn that it comes down is pretty solid. Now, if your opponent has got 2 creatures in any way, shape, or form by turn 4, which is not even remotely out of the question, this probably can't attack in profitably. It may be able to trade with something, maybe. But yeah, it's still a nice aggressive card, and it will fit relatively nicely in an aggressive deck. And yeah, I think it's fine. You know, it's not impressive in any way, shape, or form, and I think it's, I think it's fine filler level. I think it's a middle-of-the-road C. It's not that amazing. It's not that bad. Fits a little bit better in super aggressive decks and a little bit worse in others. So, yeah, Voltaren Duelist, not much to say. Middle-of-the-road C. Finally, the last card of the red set review is Wolf of Devil's Breach. 3 red for a creature elemental wolf mythic. It's a 5/5. Whenever Wolf of Devil's Breach attacks, you may pay 1 in a red and discard a card. If you do, Wolf of Devil's Breach deals damage to target creature or planeswalker equal to the discarded card's converted mana cost. Interesting. It's a 5/5 for 5. Cool. Passes the vanilla test. Totally solid. So when it attacks, I can pay 2 and discard a card. Probably I want to discard a Madness card because then I can recast it. I'm using 2 mana, so you know my spiel here. It's not a great Madness enabler, but it's an okay Madness enabler for 2 mana. If you're at 5, you've already got 3 mana, so you're going to be able to cast the discounted Madness cards. You're going to be able to cast some of the regular cost mana cards, but the X ones are not going to do that good. But in addition to that, you get to hit your opponent for the CMC of the card that you just threw away and hopefully recast. So you actually get the card plus the damage. It seems pretty solid. It definitely seems pretty solid. You, of course, don't want to be throwing away your 4-drops and 5-drops just to get damage out of them usually, but there's going to be certainly situations where that's just a fantastic thing to do. You know, if I can turn a 4/4 for 4 into 4 straight damage and kill a creature and get in for 5, that's a decent trade. I think this card's totally fine. I think it's super first pickable. I'm not looking at it as an amazing Madness enabler. It's a fine Madness enabler, but I think it's an amazing curve topper for the aggressive deck. I think the aggressive deck that's going to play a single 5-drop is going to love this card. In the red-green Stompy decks, I think it may even be pretty good because you will have probably a little bit more 4-drops than you're used to, maybe even some extra 5-drops. I think this is just an absolute first pickable card. I think it's super duper solid. Even in bomb territory, I think we can go an A- on this. I don't think it ends the game fast enough to go higher than an A-, but I think A- is exactly where this ends up. I'll first pick it every single time and be pretty happy playing it. So that's going to wrap it up for the red set review. Red is looking pretty darn good. The vampires are solid. The werewolves are solid. The removal is solid. I want to play red. I want to play red quite a bit. There's a lot of red commons that are really good, red uncommons. I think red might possibly be the best color in the format. I think you're going to see a lot of red something decks. Red white, red blue, red black, red green, all viable. I really want to see if the red-blue instant deck comes together that I was talking about. Anyways, let me know in the comments below what you think of red, what your favorite cards are from red. Of course, any comments, suggestions you have about my ratings, your ratings, etc. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can find me on Twitter at TheManaLeek. That's L-E-E-K, like the vegetable, not the card. And you can also find me on Facebook at facebook.com/TheManaLeek. You've already found me here on YouTube. You've got that comment section down below. Please make use of that. Please keep it civil. As well, if you like my videos, please click that little thumbs up icon. If you haven't subscribed yet, you really should. You really, really should. That'll keep you up to date on all the latest videos, such as the green set review tomorrow, the pre-release recaps that I'll be doing from my paper events, the over-the-shoulder first F&M draft, which will be up the day after release before anybody has any draft content up. You'll be able to find all that here, so you want to subscribe so you know when it goes up. As well, please share my content. If you like seeing me, you want to help me grow, share this to your favorite subreddits, to your favorite forums, your Facebook groups, your local store, etc. Spread the word of the Mana Leak. But as always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, see y'all tomorrow.